As you will see, in the blue, we are going to have LucifroN playing as the Abbasid Dynasty, but in the red, it is going to be a more standardized choice, something we're used to seeing over the months since release of Age of Empires 4. It's going to be France manned by Kyo here on Dry Arabia. Well, although this may be following tradition, it doesn't mean it's overwhelmingly powerful, because something has to be said. This matchup is very different to what it was even just 2 weeks ago. Ever since the Abbasids got their buffs to the Berry Bush lines, ever since Horsemen, of course, got juiced back up to have 2 ranged armor in the Feudal Age, something has changed. There's been a shift in the winds, and it's no longer the dominance of French cavalry or armored cavalry. It's becoming more about the light horsemen, the naked men with spears, as I like to say them, riding on horseback. They are incredibly lethal. And with that buff up to the food eco for the Abbasids and their easy access of going into secondary TC and buffering the economy further, they're actually able to escalate very quickly into horsemen. And that's the scary factor, even for knights, because something that I think a lot of people don't really process is that while in a one-on-one vacuum, a knight beats a horseman. Even in a 2-on-1 vacuum, a knight can beat a horseman. But it doesn't work that simply when you talk about the scalability of battle. When you talk about both sides building up their armies to ludicrous counts, right? Like if you think about 20 horsemen versus 10 knights, there's a lot more at play here. There's surrounding factors, right? Like the fact that you can actually target one of these knights with 3 horsemen. Meanwhile, like the knights are clashing one-on-one. It's not a direct comparative. It's not like when you've got 2 versus 1. All of a sudden, just doubling, or not doubling, timesing the number by 10 on both sides tends to skew it in favor of the horseman. It's a really weird kind of dynamic to watch, but usually it comes down to formation shuffling. It also means that you can't actually min-max your pull away anymore as knights because you get enveloped. And this is the Zerg factor that's really been defining the current meta. It's all about that rush into horsemen. And as I said, we've even seen knights being completely neglected by French players. LucifroN himself playing on this very map in the series yesterday as France didn't get a single French knight until I believe it was about 22 or 26 minutes in the game. Simply spamming horsemen and archers in the early game. So, LucifroN opening up, already starting to boom up into that eco wing. Remember, this comes a lot quicker now for the Abbasids, courtesy of the fact that they decreased the research time from 120 seconds to 105. So he will cruise up into a Feudal Age timing pretty comfortably. Meanwhile, Kyo delaying himself a little bit, still needs a little bit more food. His timing should, in theory, as France, be a little bit quicker than the Abbasids. But think about the knock-on effects here. Ever since they changed the tech up times to the Abbasids, this Civ feels a lot more comfortable because although it's still a fixed timing, in these early phases with the Feudal and Castle Age, you aren't investing villages in this research, but you're still getting a healthy timing. Meanwhile, your opponent, look what he has to do. He brings 4 villages over to try and build this up. That is 4 villages not gathering for, what, let's say a minute here. So you're missing out on 40 additional resources on average per minute per villager. That's 160 gone straight away. Well, it doesn't sound like a lot when you consider the numbers required for Castle and Imperial. In this early game eco, it's actually a big chunk of your effective economy, and it actually limits your choices to a certain degree. And it also means that actually when LucifroN arrives in this Feudal Age, he'll instantly be able to afford the military building, and that actually strips away a big advantage of France. Remember that France, because of the ability to get a military production building as one of the landmarks, it's actually a big booster to the timing of Feudal. Ever since these changes came in around the Abbasids' research time and House of Wisdom, that extra resource boon that is there allows them to afford this Brax or maybe a stable, archery range, whatever they want to go for, very quickly, much quicker than they used to be able to. And it means that they're much more prepared up against these early rush civs like the English, like the French, and like the Mongols. There we go. You just see the timing. This is what I mean. LucifroN's already up there. And he'll already prep some Rax units. Like, it's going to go down now. Spears are going to start coming out. He knows it's going to be on the defensive to start with. There's no point pushing Horsemen just yet. You actually want to inflate your food eco, and you want to scale yourself. He's probably thinking about going for a secondary TC, weighing up the choices. But considering that the stone is at the front of his base, a little bit exposed, this just might be a game where LucifroN doesn't risk it for the biscuit. I think he might just play on 1 TC in this game and look to scale into Horsemen still, just knowing that he's going to have surplus eco over time, due to the fact that not only the berries allowing him to gather so much quicker, because remember, they're 30% quicker for the Abbasids, and they can carry 3 additional to begin with. The other detail that matters here is once fresh foodstuffs is researched, every villager is half price. And over time, that escalates. By the time you got 10 additional villagers deeper into the game, you've just saved yourself 250 food. That is basically 2 horsemen. And we will see the horsemen. Stable now being dropped. Meanwhile, on the other side, it is going to be an archery range. So Kyo, surprisingly enough, playing into the hand of his opponent. But he kind of has to. Look what he saw. He saw the racks. He understands what his opponent has, so he has to get the archery range out. And this is where that natural flow starts to benefit these horsemen spamming civs. Because now, it's a very cut and dry choice for LucifroN. He continues into the spears. He gets the horseman as well. And all of a sudden, he has a way of countering both things that will be coming out from the French player. Something that would be interesting to actually see out of Talk, not Talk, but Kyo here. I don't know why he's called Talk. I'll address that now. He's Kyo, by the way. That's why I've named him that in the top. But the interesting thing I'd love to see out of Kyo here is not French Knights. I would love to see him go for Horsemen. It's so much more bang for buck. Look at the cost of these two things. 240 resources, 120. You get 2 for the price of 1. And really, all you want to do is try to match the pace of this Horseman spam and shift away from the spearman line as quickly as possible. Really, all you're trying to do is create this buffer zone so your archers can pick spears apart. And the fact that Horsemen move quicker and can peel off, I think is very beneficial here. And looks like LucifroN is going for that secondary TC. But this is very different. This is a very different timing compared to what players used to do. And this was actually a big issue with the Abbasids. You go back just 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, a month. The timing on this was meant to be about a minute quicker than LucifroN's going to achieve. Maybe a minute and a half, possibly even 2. There was literally just a complete and utter rush towards TC. And the problem with that build is it left you very exposed to any early aggression. It was far too greedy. But now, ever since the inflation on the food count, it's giving that extra surplus to be able to afford these horsemen and these spearmen comfortably, and they will function as your defensive unit to cover you now going to the secondary TC. It's a much more comfortable build for the Abbasids than where they were before, and it means that actually in terms of their ranking, they've moved essentially from dog tier to, I'd say, A tier. Possibly B. I give them A. I think A is fair. They're definitely proving formidable, mainly because these changes allow them to more smoothly reach their castle age timing, and should the Abbasids ever arrive at that point in the game, that's when you get the creeping siege, with the Springwalls and Mangonels being built out in the field. March out. Spears and Horsemen chasing out. And this spear count is healthy. You can see that Kyo is reluctant to engage. He's just going to sacrifice the archers. I don't think he can ever turn around and try and punish this. He has got a long way to run. He might lose more archers if he's not careful. The formation shuffling is hurting him. He shifts away. So he will lose the archers. A really good trade to open up for LucifroN. And the move by Kyo, he tries to go around the back to find his way into the eco lines. It's going to be difficult, though. And it looks like was he trying... Oh, my God. He was trying to sneak a villager in. I think he was trying to outpost rush this. And instead, he's just going to be ultimately punished. Movement in. Spears will just shove their sticks deep inside the villain and kill him off. And damage already done. But not for LucifroN. No, he's the one who's done the damage in this situation. Like, he was hoping he was going to deny this TC for a little bit longer, but it's already been constructed. And this is concerning. Because right now, like, you've been buffered away. You're being pressured in your base of the Horseman right inside. And LucifroN, well, he is the pacemaker here. Right now, they are even on the eco count, but that is about to drastically change in favor of LucifroN. Kyo is going to have to step this up. And so many spears as well. And these spears haven't even been juiced up yet, by the way, folks. This gets much more scary for Kyo as the game goes on, because if he plays hard into a cavalry composition, this is actually your worst nightmare. This opponent is brutal because of this tech right here. The Phalanx allows you to attack with double the amount of spears onto each individual knight or horseman or whatever cavalry you got. Remember what we talked about, that whole concept of horsemen versus knights, right? And the ability to, like, zerg around them and say, for example, you have one knight, they can be attacked from several different directions by X horsemen. Well, a limitation to that strategy, it does reach its power spike when you fully envelop your opponent, right? Like, they can't move away, but at the same time, you can't actually min-max your counter spears attacking them anymore because they're surrounded on all sides. The beautiful thing about the Phalanx is it allows a secondary line of spearmen to reach these knights. These knights, which, by the way, are about to get a freebie. They'll only get one. Oh, they get the second villager as he was garrisoning. I can't believe they still haven't fixed that. For those unaware, there's this weird interaction where when you garrison something into a building, after it disappears, it's actually still vulnerable if the attack is underway. I've seen this from ranged attacks as well. I've notably seen this happen to Delhi players when they're banking their scholars, where the scholars get sniped by arrows. The arrows are midway through the air, but the unit is clearly garrisoned. And then all of a sudden, a second later, you've got 0 of 1 garrisoning your building. So this is a weird interaction. I kind of hope that they fix it. I don't like that actually exists. Maybe it's a bit more acceptable melee because obviously the balance of things having to get closer. I think it's absolutely stupid that ranged units can still snipe things that are technically in a building. Horseman, in the meantime, continue to raid. And he has forced the Spearman out, so that's going to be the Trinity. So Kyo making a heavy investment. He went double archery range, racks as well. So right now, it feels like LucifroN is making him dance. It's like dance monkey dance. Like he's not really getting the game he wants. He's not really finding this dive-in pressure within Knights as much as he'd like to. And at the same time, he's being forced to diversify his portfolio of units a lot more than a French player would like to at this phase in the game. And you can see the composition for LucifroN. It's going to be a mirror situation. Of course, only one archery range compared to the two, but he's scaling the TC front, which means that, if anything, Kyo needs to find a way of dealing out additional pressure. And instead, he's the one just being slayed here. Nice move in with the spears. And he can't play in these choke points. This is the really frustrating part. With how powerful spears are these days to cavalry, you can't make these same very aggressive shifts that you normally would have as a French, where if you talked about release patch, it wouldn't have been uncommon to have seen a French player ride into this gap here, into this risky choke point. But you can't do that anymore because you lose all of the Knights, just due to the fact that Spearman can lock you in so easily. Horseman archers, everything moving forward. Feels like Kyo is getting caught out in the midfield a lot here. He always has to turn and burn, and that means he's losing a lot of units when he runs back because it is that static force of infantry. And static force infantry from LucifroN is in. Onto the worker line, but they're going to back away. They'll buy enough more they can chew when they see that many archers. But more importantly, he's keeping his opponent pinned in, and look what he's found. No, big mistake. Kyo cut off on both sides. No textiles, so he's definitely losing 1, 2, possibly 3 of these villagers. Depends how far LucifroN wants to go. Stabby, stabby. We'll back away once the spears arrive, and this is getting frustrating. I mean, LucifroN now with a 10 eco unit lead. This is getting difficult, but don't worry. It's not over yet, folks. Kyo, he finally found a breach point. LucifroN was so busy being a greedy bugger, taking out the villages belonging to the French Knights, the French player rather. He ignores the French Knight, sneaking in on his wood line, and it does cost him dearly. Still not enough, though. Still a big lead building for LucifroN. And more importantly, constant pressure all over the place is leading to the fact that Kyo, despite the fact he's not losing all these villages, they're not gathering for him. They're stopping, they're running, left, right, and center. Meanwhile, that was possibly the first time Kyo was forced to uncomfortably move his units away. Other than that, it's been an immediate garrison into a building directly next to the villages, which doesn't really hurt his eco times as much. And it's all a result of this pocket ecoing that we talked about, that we warned about. That France thinks it can get away with, but it's dead wrong. Like, this is not old gen, where France just dominated everything. New gen Abbasids is a whole other beast. You can actually see the Abbasids now the ones moving out of these pocket ecos because those food berries are so damn good for the economy. That 30% buffered gather rate makes them better than sheep. It makes it better than switching over to farms. And it's something that LucifroN is tapping into because now that he's eliminated most of the Knights, he understands that Kyo is in check. He won't be able to move out. He's invested hard into this composition of archers and spearmen, which means he himself doesn't have that dynamic force of Knights to dive in and punish LucifroN for this double food pocket eco. And Kyo, this is assessment stage. What do you do? Do you double down on feudal, or do you try, for example, for a second TC yourself? Do you try to scale up into castle? You're going to have to make a choice very soon. We'll see how healthy the numbers are right now for LucifroN. Lucy's almost ready for his own tech up. And he will arrive in castle age much quicker than Kyo at this rate. All the while gathering at a ridiculous rate because he's not investing anyone into the upgrade. Remember, this is all automated. You don't have to use villagers to get your next age. Horseman just in again. Frustrating here. And Kyo really not min-maxing here. There's one limpy little horseman here who got ignored the entire time. So freebie on both of the archers. He doesn't even lose a horseman for it. Meantime, a scout and a knight is not going to cut it. Both players still ignoring textiles, by the way. Very surprising in this game. Both of them could have actually utilized it. I don't think Lucy was pressured into it as much, but Kyo definitely should have had it. And there it is. It's going to be the double TC choice. This is risky, though. This will leave him exposed, and its positioning might reveal it very quickly to LucifroN. And if LucifroN gets that information, with the tech up already underway, he just might pounce. Because remember, something that makes this Civ so lethal at this stage of the game is once they crack castle, they move across, build their siege weapons in the field, and instantly you are under siege by an overwhelming force of mangonels. It's not like when you're up against other opponents, where they have to pay 300 wood for the building, and then it takes them a good 40 seconds to get that unit out, or 30 seconds to get that unit out. Instead, you build it in about 10 seconds in the field right next to your opponent's base. It's a scary situation, and Kyo needs to be careful. Ride in with the Knights. Onto the villagers. Auto attack's going to come out from LucifroN Spearman here, blocking in the Knights and forcing the way, and not really butchering the right thing. They've turned targets onto the Spears instead. And these trades are not working out for Kyo the way he'd intended. He will leave one Knight around, so makes it somewhat worthwhile in the end. The Scout even joining in as well as he butchers through these villages slowly but surely. But the fact that he didn't commit all 3 Knights means he's not doing enough damage to beat even one Spearman here. So even after he butchers one in the beginning and gets a second on the outro, it's just not good enough. I feel like this isn't the dent you need. LucifroN's still 14 units ahead on the eco side. And now, look at it. Kyo's in an uncomfortable situation. He has to switch over into farmlands. It means instead of scaling his military force now, via more buildings, more archers coming out, he's actually having to spend a lot of this wood income to prep his food for the coming minutes. Meanwhile, when we look at the other side for LucifroN, yes, he's prepped some farmlands, but he's still gathering deer, he's still gathering the sheep, he's very comfortable. He also has this secondary bush line on the southern side that's easily accessible and easily defendable for him. So overall, LucifroN isn't going to be pressured to waste wood economically. Instead, he can invest it where he definitely wants it, which is militarily in these siege weapons, as the Abbasses do the dance of summoning to bring a Mangonel to life. And the walls will now go up, so LucifroN just creating those final points to ensure he doesn't get flanked. And you just see the absurdity, right? Like, what was that, 10 seconds? I feel like that was 10 seconds. I love how this actually says 40 seconds when you hover over it. That is the biggest lie I have ever heard. I think that's the biggest lie in video games. Well, maybe as far back as the No Man's Sky announcement trailer. It's pretty ridiculous. It doesn't take 40 seconds at all. Like, 40 seconds. Okay, 1, 2. So you start this at what, 55, shall we say? Yeah, that's 40 seconds. He even stopped halfway through and it's still just over 10 seconds. I don't want to know where whoever wrote that, I don't want to know where they got their degree. All right, because I'm pretty sure it's an online college from a city we never heard of. And I'm pretty sure they were sleeping with a lecturer to get their passing grade. Moving in. LucifroN now with double Mangonel, and, well, Kyo has no response. This is problematic. Remember, he didn't go hard in the cavalry, so he can't even flank around quickly to get rid of these Magus. The only good news for him is that LucifroN's not even using them. They're just parked here. Like some sort of Chad Flex play, like, yo, bro, look what I got. Ain't they cool? Oh, not cool. Not cool, bro. Villagers being forced to Gary. Mangonels can switch over to the racks if they choose, but instead, the shots onto the archers. Kyo caught with his trousers down, taking a whiz. He's going to be tripped up. The only good news is at least he has reached Castle Age now, but the pressure is not going to let up. The double ram play is going to come out. LucifroN wants to end this game now. He understands he's so powerful, and after he sees the Castle Age confirmation, he understands just how far ahead he is. He doesn't have to worry about his opponent outscaling him. 8-man arms, and this double Mangonel with ram play is going to be good enough to get through the TC expansion and probably the whole base. And Kia, he's got one shot at this, but the army just really isn't looking healthy. A Mangonel could just instantly end you. The rush out from the villagers, but the Mangonels are not that close. They'll turn onto the archers, forcing them closer to the melee and archer line, and that's looking at it. I don't think he's got it anymore. With more man-at-arms and crossbows coming on, this is all over. Kyo has no way back into this game. LucifroN will take the opening game. And just clean execution. Just clean, simple understanding of Abbas's strengths from LucifroN. The timing is as well. The most critical one, actually going back to the early game, the timing around moving onto the stone lines. A lot of players would have went for this stone much quicker. They would have sacrificed getting the racks down initially. And by doing so, they would have opened the floodgates for them to have been overwhelmed by French knight spams. But instead, LucifroN, he understands this. He's played this game long enough. He's played this matchup. He's played France itself enough to understand their power spikes. He doesn't give in to it. He doesn't get too greedy like we've seen Abbasid players do in the past. He understands that the new generation of Abbasids, with their gather rates on berries, with their flexibility into horsemen if need be, he can actually kosher, just cruise through into that 10-15 minute timing and look to bolster up from there. And once he reaches that point in the game, he has the flexibility to choose on a long feudal or go straight into castle. A choice that Kyo is stripped of because he invested too heavily in the early army presence and wasted it entirely. We talked about the natural counter and transitions, right? It opens up with your cavalry for the French. There's a counter coming out of Iraq's for the Abbasids, which they can afford, courtesy of what we were talking about, the saved resources because you don't have anyone building your landmarks. And then the next switch, what happens? Well, French want to go for archers. Well, I'm going to go for horsemen. What? But I've got knights. Who cares? I can run past them. And we saw it time and time again. Even with a few knights in the field, even with a composition that looked like it should be somewhat comfortable, Kyo never wanted to take the fights. The issue with not wanting to take the fights is it's not a it's fine, do it when you're ready moment when you're up against horsemen. As we saw, the moment you say, I can't take this fight, you turn around and run, you get burned. You get chased down. And the worst part is, if you formation shuffle them away, it always pushes and prioritizes range units to the back of your formation. So in the event that you're running away, that squishy underside of your belly is exposed. And that means the horsemen are actually doing maximum damage because that's the unit they get bonus damage against is your ranged units. And it just allows this easy cruise mode for LucifroN where after he takes that initial bout, after he pushes Kyo back into his base, all we see is constant raids. And we never saw an investment further in Kyo's raids. If you think about it, he had that initial group of knights and that was about it. If they found value, great. If they didn't, that's it. Like, you're not doing anything else because instead of being able to move out and actually force pressure on your opponent's side of the base, you're always dancing around your own base as these horsemen raid back and forth on your greedy pocket ecos that we've warned against would be a problem for him. And I have to wonder how different this game potentially could have been had Kyo invested in horsemen. But you know what? Disney handles what-ifs well enough. I don't need to get into them as well. Instead, I need to get into game 2. So short break, and in a few minutes, we'll return for the second game of this best of 7. Is going to be a mirror matchup in game number 2 as we move in with HRE on HRE. Let's hop into this one. So this should be exciting. And I already was just teasing the chat. They already knew what I was going to start talking about. There's something about this mirror matchup that I just like to nerd out about because, you know, I'm a little bit of an HRE fanboy, played it a lot myself. And one of the important details is going to be the optimization of your predate's pathing in the early phase of the game. We'll talk about that in a minute when we visibly see it. First thing we need to focus on is the fact that this is Danube River. So both players actually chose to instantly go HRE. I think Kyo is a little bit more revealed in this choice because he has been favoring HRE here on Danube. And I think LucifroN going for HRE himself is actually a jerk reaction to the fact that he knows his opponent likes HRE. So this says to me that I think LucifroN is comfortable in taking this mirror matchup and he feels like he's actually going to have the edge. And he might be right. I think after that game 1, it felt like from an economically balancing stage of the game, he had a better understanding of his Civ compared to his opponent, and it was something he was able to exploit. And it's going to be curious to see if that economical theory crafting is going to work to a quick Castle Age, Imperial Age rush type game, or if LucifroN's going to see like a chink in the armor, understand a weakness has been shown by Kyo that you can exploit to drag a Feudal Age long term. Something that I don't think I've actually seen on this map so far. Most HRE players, when they play on Danube River, there is really no pressure in the feudal. It's instantly up into the castle. So, kind of curious to see if there's going to be a change in that plan. I doubt it, considering Lucy's generation here. It's a fairly decent one. And this usually happens for the player in the top corner. You can see that he's got most of his resources close together. He can actually tap wood, gold, food, and stone with an Ark and Chapel placed around here. It will be loose on the wood line, though, so I wouldn't be surprised if instead he just drops an Ark and Chapel between the double food supply and the wood line on the right, and then use it later for farmlands. I think that's actually more beneficial in this situation, but obviously, at the same time, when you're playing water hybrid maps, you do have that flexibility around what you want to do with your Ark and Chapel, i.e. ignoring food because you're getting so much off the waterfront. The waterfront that Kyo has moved on to much quicker than LucifroN. This is interesting, actually. Lucy has purposely delayed himself here. And I'm wondering what the end strategy is here. He hasn't even opted to go onto straggler trees. Instead, it just looks like it's a full shift. And he has done it. There it is. You couldn't see it. Lucy, he was like, this is the game. I see the straggler trees. I need to hide the top secrets. I can't let them know what I'm doing. He's optimized his early game prelate. This is a very big deal. And it's a deal that both players have done. And I love to see this. So what am I talking about? What am I waffling about? Everyone's like, what the hell's wrong? What are you doing about Pigeon? This detail here, this shifting of your sheep to the direction where your prelate needs to go is a very big deal. And players have very quickly started to clock onto the imperative function of this, like the need to do it, because it really is that big of a booster. Because what's happening is because they've got the, say, let's look at Kyo's base. Because he's got his sheep here instead of on this corner, he's saving his prelate at least one villager worth of buffing of walking. So he's minimizing the walking distance between his eco lines to ensure he maximizes the amount of villages that the prelate can buff. Because remember, a prelate buff only lasts 30 seconds and it takes 3 seconds to do each one. So it's really important that you strip away all that idle time from walking between these areas as much as possible. Of course, Keo did have to run over to the goal line in the end, but that is basically because now he's adjusting his economy, right? Like, he needed it initially on the wood line to flurry up on the wood front so he could afford the initial boats. And I'm still okay with this location on sheep, by the way, because I think optimally, like, you can't now shift the sheep across and move the villages because then it's just too much lost idle time. Instead, I like this prioritization here. And on the same side, I really like what LucifroN has done on his side of the map, right? Where he's got his sheep on the northern side and he's got his gold nearby. Because for him, because he's been ignoring the dock front and he hasn't gone on water at all, he actually doesn't care about wood as much. It's not important to his early game scaling. And instead, LucifroN now kind of opens up some interesting options. He could choose to completely ignore the waterfront and rush across and then burn his opponent down before he's defended himself on the docklands. Alternatively, he could actually just use the initial resources underneath his condensed Archon Chapel placement to boost himself up rapido into the castle age ahead of Keo and then arrive on the sea with boom ships before his opponent reaches his own castle age. Intrigued to see what he's going to do. I do feel like when you have these players who start in the top north corner, they do tend to do this approach where they can ignore the docklands more. I don't think that same option is available to Keo. Keo, when you start central like this, you need to immediately move out, get a dock down, and then lock over the central crossing. Because you have so much real estate on the waterfront in this situation because of where you start your docks. Compare that to LucifroN. If LucifroN was early pressured, he doesn't have a fallback plan. This is where the end cuts. So essentially, you would have to fight tooth and nail as you shifted further upriver. It's a lot more risky. It looks like Lucy is going to move out of Villager. He will drop a palisade of his own. It's worth doing. The reason being is it means that your opponent can't just instantly delete their wall and rush you on the waterfront. Because right now, the reason you want to keep your opponent away on this waterfront, you don't want galleys coming upriver, is because if he controls these choke points, it actually becomes a lot harder to reach your opponent's base. The importance of this central island cannot be overstated, ever. This is the most important variable in Danube River, and the reason being is because of how long it takes you to reach your opponent's base otherwise. Think about the distance that LucifroN has to walk. If he walks straight from here to his opponent's base using the central island, he shifts down here, he walks straight across, and then he comes across here. On the other hand, if LucifroN is forced to wrap round on the left side and stay on the big island, look how far you have to run. It's quite a distance. Through some notable choke points as well, so you can't even argue there's no choke points to worry about. Either way has choke points, it's just one is quicker. And it's why a lot of players instantly play hard into the central island to try and lock it in. And quick walling coming out. I like this from Lucy. Just deny your opponent moving out quick. He understands that this scout is going to assassinate him. Otherwise, look what he can do. Oh my god. Is he going to do this? He hasn't done it right. Lucy, no! Oh my god, he missed one of the walls, and he didn't. I thought he was going to walk back on this one and walk through the other side. He's going to tap it now, but missed opportunity to sneak onto the other side of the wall and build it up before the scout could kill you. I don't think he can do it now. So instead, he's going to keep tapping, and he's going to get the bad news. He probably didn't notice because of the angle. Like, look at it from the camera angle right now. It's so easy to miss this. Oh, and he's dead. He was getting so close to tapping it, so... Keo, I don't know if he's realized this himself, but he still has a way through. All the while, LucifroN already up. Like we said, because he didn't go in the water, this is what it enables. You get a little bit quicker of a castle age timing when you have this condensed of an economy, which is what you usually get given when you start in this top corner. And it's something he's exploiting to the map. To the max. LucifroN, I think the moment he saw he was in the top corner and he looked at his initial surroundings, he instantly made this judgment call to not go on water. Before that, it was probably on the table, but it's actually smart thinking to deny himself the greed, shall we say, the unnecessary greed of going on water and slowing down his tech time by, say, 30 seconds or a minute. I mean, you can see the difference for 30 seconds right here. And actually, look how much Keo is investing. 16 villagers to get this up, and he's still going to be beaten to the punchline. There it is. Tech up is complete. Now, something we haven't talked about yet is the generation in terms of relic placement. And I think it was fairly even from what we've been seeing. Lucy, you can see he's grabbed 2 relics. I'm looking for the 3rd. Yeah, he moved out. So this actually was a very fair and balanced generation for double HRE, I gotta say. Like, you had 2 very safe relics at the back for Keo. You had 2 a little bit risky ahead of him once for LucifroN, but they were on his side of the map. And you had a central one right next to the Sacred Site. This is actually a very fair generation. I'd love to see this one more for HRE players, because the more I look around the map, the more fair it actually looks. Like, everything seems pretty reasonable. You can argue that Kyo's got more wood lines around him initially at his base, but that's fair considering he has a less defendable location because he can be attacked from two sides, right? This is the balance. This is the whole concept. Usually, when you're the centralized player, you do tend to get easier access to some resources. You get a wider spread on your initial waterfront, but you are exposed on two fronts. Meanwhile, the player up in the corner, the balance is meant to be, although you're pinned into a corner, you don't have that flexibility to go multiple ways. You do usually have a lot of condensed resources next to you, and also you do have that natural defense of not having to look behind you. There's going to be stables being dropped, so Knights now going to start coming out. Only on one side, though. I like this from Lucy, because he's already secured 3 of the relics. Why does he need to come out? If he just gets Spearman with this kind of back choke starting location, he can actually box himself in and rush into Imperial much quicker than Kyo. This is actually a really cool move. I don't often see players do this. So I think we've seen a few players attempt it, but the way they do it is very different. They actually invest in Knights still. They try to prowl around the center of the map. They don't infinitely forfeit the rest of the map to enable a quicker Imperial timing. They do come out and they do try to hold their opponent at the center, but that's not the case this time around. LucifroN instantly understands that now that he has 3 relics, he already has the clear advantage. He has a great seed start because of everything being condensed. He can easily get a Palace of Swabia much quicker than Kyo, probably over a minute quicker, possibly closer to 2. And we'll see if it holds true, though, because the one thing you have to take note of is Kyo, this food front is starting to pay for itself, right? The waterfront of fishing boats is starting to return dividends. It's an initial investment for long-term gains, because realistically, we see it time and time again. When you actually invest in these docks to begin with, and you get these initial fishing boats out, it actually slows down your tech times, at least going up to feudal and castle. And it's exactly why a lot of English players don't go for dock at all, is because it actually stunts your feudal age timing, and thus you lose your biggest power spike of longbows. But in this matchup, obviously it's all about greed, it's about long-term scalability. You're thinking more into Imperial, and that is why it's acceptable what he's done here. But LucifroN beats his opponent at the punchline. Kyo is not going to be far behind him, though. He actually gets a perfect timing on this, actually matching up within a second of LucifroN's. And now when they get underway, the difference is that LucifroN, thinking he has a clear lead, has only invested 9 villages compared to the 20 of Kyo. And that is good for Kyo. Yes, he's losing a bunch of initial gathering, right, through these villages not getting on those food lines, those gold lines, whatever. But what he is doing is he's getting quicker into that maximum generation of villages as soon as possible, and also much quicker getting access to the tech ups that can be vital in those initial minutes when you have a mirror tech up timing like this. And the walling, that's going to be a little bit late. So Knight will snipe out one of the villies. And there's the bad news for LucifroN. I don't think he's going to shift more villages across. I think it's kind of a sunken cost at this point. By the time the villages arrive at the Palace of Swabia, it's mostly going to be complete. So instead, you just accept you're going to be behind. But that is concerning. Kyo, all of a sudden, looking very strong in this game. I thought Lucy would actually achieve much quicker timing considering he got all 3 relics. But we really are seeing the power of the boats. The fact that even after 10 minutes, LucifroN still doesn't have a dock down at all shows you just how much eco he missed out on. The fact that he was actually beaten in the end of the Imperial Age by Kyo. In the meantime, Spears did sneak in, so it'll be a little bit frustrating, but with the TC, the Palace of Swabia, there's only so much you can actually do with 3 Spearmen. And it means now you're in an awkward situation, and we see that awkwardness taking place. Kyo establishing control on the central island because LucifroN has refused to come out and play. He walled himself in. He showed no intent to come out, and it means now that natural staging point, that power spike of the central island, Wolf Island apparently some people call it, is going to be fully accessible to Kyo, and LucifroN is going to have to fight tooth and nail just to get a foot on it. And then that escalates in the other detail, doesn't it, folks? Because that does mean that Kyo can easily take both sacred sites. You can see he's going to wall up on the west side here soon. And once they're captured, it's not only negating a lot of the additional gold trickle LucifroN got from getting 1 additional relic, it also means that all of a sudden you have to fight into this power point that Kyo has, right? Where his military district is going to be directly in front of you, obnoxiously staring you down. You're not going to have an easy time moving out to decap these locations. Another detail to keep in mind in the coming minutes is if LucifroN doesn't move out very soon, he's not going to actually be able to scale his military. The reason being is he won't have enough room to build up a district. And even if he does manage to, say, find enough room for 10 racks so he can keep up with the numbers that Kyo's looking towards, he won't have a transition point. So then Kyo, with all this landscape, actually has the room to build a military district for melee, a military district for ranged, cavalry, siege, whatever. Whereas LucifroN, he's budgeted. He's hard budgeted right now. Every house, every farm that he builds is one less area he has for a military building. And there we go. Frelent now moving out. So Kyo about to prep himself that win condition 10 minutes from now. LucifroN still with just one measly spearman. Little Tony over here has somehow survived this long, but won't really find much impact on his own. And the man-at-arms count will start to escalate. You can see that lead up already. LucifroN does need to prep a response force, but with only 2 racks, it is difficult. And I think LucifroN's going to be forced to play a heavy siege composition, which can be risky with the limited wood at your starting location. So he has to make sure everything counts. The good news is that right now, if Kyo continues to zerg like this, he's going to get maximum impact out of Mangonel zerging. The problem is that initial investment you need, right? You can't just have one siege workshop. You're going to need 2 or 3 pushing out Mangonels. And that itself, it's not only the down cost of paying basically 1,000 wood to get that online, it's then also the fact that you need to make sure you have the wood to be pushing units out of these buildings to justify their existence. The racks keep going up. Kyo is very one-minded right now. I'm not a big fan of this. The fact that he doesn't have a siege workshop yet seems like an oversight to me. Like, you have to know your opponent is probably going to whip out the siege himself. So just getting Springles alone actually would make me a happy chappy. I think that would deny a lot of what LucifroN's doing and could end this game very quickly. And although you don't know for sure what LucifroN's doing in his base, just having a siege workshop to begin with is a good choice. It gives you options, right? It gives you the bombards for the quick siege. It gives you the mangonels to counter any zerg, and also gives you the option to go Springles to counter your own issue of your opponent's anti-zerg. And LucifroN made a mistake here. I just noticed it. He went into spears. Was this intended? This might have been intended. I hope it was intended. I felt like it was a mistake because I think he saw the initial knights and thought that's what he was going to come under fire from. And also instantly going for a bombard, which is just going to be burnt down if he's not careful. Villagers move out. 2 of them is good enough to repair against this, so he will be able to protect it. So the reason I said I'm not sure if this is a mistake is because of what's coming out now, these Langsneck. These Langsneck are pretty interesting in a composition with spears. Most notably because, are you noticing what they're wearing? Have you noticed something, my fellow Age of Empires? They look quite similar, right? Outside of the fact one has a stick and one has a sword, in terms of their dress code, they basically embarrassingly came to the place wearing the same clothes. So that could actually be a very interesting factor in these fights, is that actually Kyo might struggle to understand just how many Langsneck and how many spear are coming at him. And the spear is simply cannon fodder in that situation, because remember, as the HRE, you do get that unique tech that allows you to get additional armor on this unit. And that's before he even starts getting the blacksmith researchers. He hasn't even got marching drills yet. I'm going to start ripping my hair out one of these days, folks. I've got to say, it's quite baffling how often I watch people not get marching drills. Don't have to worry about that with Kyo, though. He went for the triple blacksmith, so he's got pretty much everything he needs for now. And there it is now. Langsneck starting to come out for talk. And this is worrying. This is my concern about this strategy. Is like, in terms of visibility, it's actually very smart. It's very hard at a quick glance for Kyo to know what LucifroN has there. Well, like, what is the Langsneck, what's the spearman? It'd be even better if they didn't all go to the back of the formation like they do. But the big issue he now has is because he has Langsneck and spearman, well, these units aren't as tanky as man-at-arms, which means actually Kyo going for Langsneck himself gets a lot of value. And now we're going to see the siege workshops being dropped with the culverins coming out to address the bombard threat. And it's a good play as well. You need to get rid of these bombards before they get rid of your central base, because you've invested a lot here so far. Like, if you think about it logically here, you know, 8 times 150, then you've got the 600 wood over here as well. There's a lot of dead eco here if you lose this forward base. Bombard's just kind of baiting him in here. Culverin gets 1 shot out. Won't get the second, though. At least not into the bombard. And now we see the crossbowman coming out for LucifroN. He baits his opponent in even deeper as a result of this. And the crossbows, they haven't been upgraded to golden hat status yet, but they're still doing bonus damage up against these elite man-at-arms. The elite man-at-arms that will get through the bombard. No! They turned around. Kyo, he miscalculated. He thought he'd thrown the final torch and he was wrong, and that means the repairs are going to come out in time. LucifroN will keep the bombard alive. And all the while starting to be pushed back. These Langsneck dishing out decent damage. A bunch of Langsneck now coming out for Kyo. Needs to be careful because he doesn't know if there's a Mangonel rolling out behind this. So far, though, LucifroN not even interested in anti-cluster. He's going for a Culverin himself after he sees the double Culverin play coming out of Kyo. A nice sneak in. I was about to say, the Sacred Site is a concern, but LucifroN, with just a few Spearmen, actually stuck for a double Palisade and decapped the Sacred Site. And you know what the funniest part is? Kyo still hasn't noticed. LucifroN holding here for the moment. That's going to cover him to get the keep up. And that's giving him the foothold he needs. Needs to be careful the Mangonels start coming out. They're going to be problematic for him. Remember, these Langsneck do not have much health. They're a glass cannon at 95 health in elite status. And you're seeing the effect of it quickly. They're all dying. Keep should be constructive, but Kyo with a quick reaction is going to get his own down. And the Mangonel needs to be addressed. Culverin rolling in now. It is going to get sniped on, and it means it's going to be a bad trade for LucifroN. He's not going to be reloading quick enough. Doesn't get the repairs either. And instead, Kyo looking healthy. This micro around repairing is actually starting to kind of leverage in favor of Kyo right now. On the forefront, always keeping these Culverins up where he can, keeping Mangonels healed, and also getting his own keep down means that LucifroN doesn't have a clear foothold onto the island anymore. He's on the edge, about to be pushed out. He needs something strong to keep this keep alive, otherwise it's just going to fall in the blink of an eye. Now, this is the good news. And I feel like this is a bit of a mistake from Kyo, which maybe he was trying to fix when he was starting to massively horseman over here. But LucifroN's been allowed to expand. This should have been a delicate phase in his game. He should have been pressed on the east and the south. But, west rather, east and west, shall we say. But instead, he's been allowed to freely expand all the way west, and that real estate issue we were talking about is no longer there. And it's very weird because LucifroN hasn't walled up at all. Instead, Kyo has simply ignored this side of the map entirely and is now starting to be punished as just a few Spearmen haven't only ruined his Sacred Site victory condition, but they're starting to sneak through and see what the hell's happening in Kyo's base. And now we'll watch one of the most trivial battles in the history of Age of Empires as a keep fights a keep. It's a pretty tedious one, so we won't look into it too long. In the meantime, LucifroN getting some vital information. It's been a long time since he's seen in his opponent's base. He's trying to see what might be coming next. The problem is he doesn't get any military info due to the fact that Kyo's entire military district is on that central island. However, that might be info in itself. LucifroN might think that the base is still on the north side, or he might just assess that actually this is a forward base on the central island, and should Kyo ever lose that, he can suddenly lose complete control of this game. And there are going to be stone walls, so once again, LucifroN not protecting himself on the western front, but Kyo continuing to layer forward and actually taking over more of that map. And that's going to become important, folks. Remember, both of them with the Palace of Swabia, they have a lot of expendable villages, which means they can move out into these risky areas and strip these resources that would become a very vital and crucial ingredient later on in the game and remove them at the contention point, right? And then fall back to your safe resources later, which is a much smarter play. I love the fact that Kyo is doing it. I need to see LucifroN doing similar because right now, it feels like he's just strip mining everything in his local vicinity, which means very quickly he could find himself becoming desperate, whereas Kyo will always have a soft fallback point. Culverins on Culverins again. And these trades are just not working out at all for LucifroN. Bombard, Culverin. Oh, I say that. LucifroN's getting frisky now. Hasn't even started using the second Culverin. He's just getting maximum impact here. The repairs are a little bit slow from Kyo. He needs to be careful. He might lose the second Culverin. And now we start to arrive at the awkward point that we usually get in these mirror matchups. Both players just starting to amass the Zerg and get ready to just body as many into the fight as possible. And finally, Stonewall's going down from LucifroN. He'll get the bad news that he can't wall up on the west side because, of course, that high ground is being held already by Kyo. But at least he ensures there isn't a quick flank attack into his main eco line as they move out. And that's going to be something. It has to be something in this situation. And we're starting to see the advantages of being central player when the game goes longer like this. Just look how easy it is for Kyo not only to expand to the west, but also to the east. Whereas LucifroN in his corner has taken everything because he started there, Kyo hasn't even begun. He's only now moving out into this gold line, on these deers, on these wood lines. They're all still to be accessed. And it means that, like I said, LucifroN has to come out soon. It looks like he's going to be forced to. Moving in on the siege weapon, straight through, in deep. And this is a mistake out of Kyo. Look at the damage coming out. He ignores the Langsneck, and he loses the full front line. What a big mistake. LucifroN feeling healthy, does need to address the Mangonels, needs to be careful with the fire coming in, but the Culverin there, he is feeling good. Damage onto his keep is going to be somewhat superfluous, irrelevant in fact. And Langsneck, really the key here. Kyo, big mistake. I didn't expect him to dive in like that so carelessly, but we see exactly why I didn't expect that. It's such a big mistake. You're up against Langsneck. Respect the cleave. He might not have Mangonels, but he still has AoE. And I don't mean the game. I mean the cleave. As there's 16 Langsneck here. Elite Langsneck doing 26 damage with each swing. Even for these bulky 216 health man-at-arms, that hurts. And we saw just how much. And now the Bombards could get for the keep. And Kyo's game just became very, very fragile. And this keep is going to be a fail. LucifroN's going to get his up first, and that means he's going to deny any opportunity for Kyo to be able to get this down, and he'll cancel and move away. Really, really important move there. Nice idea by Kyo, but quick reactions out of LucifroN ensures that he will not be denied his wood expansion. And he needs it as well, because this is a critical timing. As long as he can keep affording the units, he will push through, and he will eliminate the central base. And all of a sudden, Kyo will be on the back foot and be looking a little bit lost. Moving in. Culverin count still pretty healthy. One Bombard is good enough to start sieging through these buildings. No Mangonels anymore. Culverin on Culverin trade. Movement in. Need to be careful. Kyo, he's going to get rounded out again. Pinched on both sides. He's getting decent cleave, but the count is just healthy for LucifroN. Up at 17 Langsneck, and in the blink of an eye, Kyo's front line is going to be gone. And this is getting worrying quickly. That's going to be the central district gone. And look what LucifroN instantly does. He says, nice silent, bro. You know what? I feel like someone from the HRE should always be present here. Let me set up my base while yours crumbles. And there really isn't anything you can do. Look, he stopped producing. He's saving up surplus. He's prepping a shift. He needs to actually get a base somewhere else. He needs to do it soon. I don't think you can push units out of the central base anymore. Instead, it should just be boom ships and walls to deny your opponent a quick way into your base. But instead, he's going for the Carracks. What? This is risky. I think boom ships, I understand why you don't want to get them because you're up against Bombards and Culverins, but you need some boom ships in there. And I'm not sure if the Carracks are going to dish out anywhere near enough damage compared to these Bombards and Culverins. I think you're actually going to lose the boat straight away. This is a really weird play coming out from Kyo. I feel like he's forfeited the game. He doesn't believe he has. But when I look at the state of things, it feels like Kyo isn't doing anything to recover himself now. I'm not seeing a new military district, because his wood is limited. And that's what makes this even more absurd. With limited wood, he just spent 400 on a boat that will probably be blown up in the blink of an eye. This is a weird one. I mean, he did at least get the keep down. He's strip mining near his opponent, getting rid of all that wood, and that might save him. The problem is he has to address what's about to be in his base. Carrack will back off for the moment. Remember, as you can see, it only has that 8-tower range, which means any siege weapon at this stage of the game, either the Bombards or the Culverins, can annihilate you. And that's why he's given a wide berth. And this is exactly why I did not like the Carrack play. It feels like I don't know what it does. I mean, I know what it does, but I don't know what it does in this game. You've just paid, what, about 750 resources, 650, like around that number, for a giant floating turd. But don't worry, because LucifroN just flushed it. And walling is only going to be so effective. Once LucifroN's past the choke point, no hope in hell. Now you're in trouble. And you might be stripping this wood. You might be dropping these keeps. But unless this is where you're going to build a new base, I don't really know what the end game plan is here. You're actually trapped in now. You can't even leave. You might have these keeps, but you are not getting back home. And your home might not even be there anyway. As there's a move in from LucifroN. Military district, where is it? Finally, it's there at the back of the base. Kyo's zerging it out with the racks. But that does mean he's exposed on the front. That means the Regnitz Cathedral, the primary TC, the Palace of Swabia. All of this is situated forward. This is where the battlefield is now going to be. And it means that LucifroN could just end up sniping out with a landmark victory if Kyo's not careful. Bombards rolling forward slowly but surely. Siege workshops being built up. More racks as well. LucifroN looking healthy. Always at 200 military. Meanwhile, Keo struggling because these houses are being burnt down. A smart move by LucifroN to deny his opponent on the supply. A movement in. Regnit's Cathedral down. Look at the gold right now. Keo, he couldn't afford this. He needs gold. He's not actually extracting any. So now he has no surplus. Only 500 gold remaining. And it's instantly gone as he builds a new line of units. He needs to build this fast. Villagers across to it now. Movement out from the man-at-arms and Langstek. No Mangonels, so it looks like LucifroN's going to have to show some respect. He did get butchered in mass in the end. Back behind the walls he will go. LucifroN probably stroking his chin, thinking, do I have room for Mangonels? Well, I'm going to have to. He's prepping it in 3 of the siege workshops, but just doesn't have the pop cap right now. He's pushing too many units. And you know what you do, folks? When you have too many units, war is fantastic population control. Just send them in. Need to make room for the Magos. And these spears constantly coming out. LucifroN just non-stop with the cannon fodder element to this composition has been effective. The Langstek are the damage dealers. The spearmen are just there to distract. And you have to give it to them. They wear the right uniform. They look the part. Fight coming in. Langstek engaged in the clash. Looking good right now for Keo. That's going to free up room for the Mangonels, though. LucifroN. We'll see this as an expendable force as the Magos are finally in play. More troops coming out. Needs to be careful. The bombards are going to be exposed. Movement in from Keo will burn them both down. There's plenty more where that came from. And Mangonels now, they're getting their shots out. This is where Keo needs to back up. He's paying himself in. The auto attack, he's going to turn around and run. However, he's going to take casualties on the exit. And that's a lot of damage done to those 15 men-at-arms. And now, with 4 Mangonels, this is where it gets dicey. Because this is actually a very big and important detail, folks. Remember those Langstek we keep talking about, we keep nerding about. Even with the University upgrades, it's a 114 health unit. 4 Mangonels will delete that. If you lose your Langstek, you lose your DPS in these fights. If you lose your DPS, even with inferior numbers of Langstek, LucifroN will obliterate you in these games. And that's concerning. And if you look at it, although you have the Culverins, you don't have Mangonels of your own, so you can't get rid of the Langstek that are going to be coming towards you. Instead, also, Culverin count is still very healthy for LucifroN, having 4 of his own. In the meantime, Keep Sneak is starting to get some success for Keo. But LucifroN can just pivot over here. If he actually establishes his keep, he can strip mine this wood line from his opponent right in his base. Moving in, Culverin sniping out. Mangonel shots, staggered formation. Keo, he's looking to wrap around the back. But that means he's going to forfeit the Culverins. They're all going to die. He's in staggered formation. The problem is what happens when you cluster up. It's cluster truck is what it is. Mangonel prepping the new round of shots. Need to be quick. The Langstek makes short work of the front line if you're not careful. The wraparound looking good. Shift away. Villagers going to keep these repaired. But with this many troopers here, it's going to be good enough. He has to keep max micro on this to make sure he's constantly clicking to repair these. Otherwise, he will lose the siege weapons. In the meantime, the main fight is going to be a wash. LucifroN wins it. Second keep goes down. And they are looking healthy. And Keo, he's looking like one bad fight away from being out this game. Because remember what we said happens at this stage. Palace of Swabia, Regnit's Cathedral, Town Center, and Arkan Chapel now all on the front line. Now, that might sound good. That's a building tanker for you, but that's also a win condition for LucifroN. And he's going to reach it. Moving in with the keep. Infantry holding back the battalion from Keo, ensuring that the keep is going to go down. Culverin's assisting, new Mangonels coming out, and a flourish of new Langstek to the front line. Regnit's Cathedral now being targeted by the bombard. Shift in by the Langstek to clean up the man-at-arms as the villagers shift back, still having effect on the front as another keep goes down for LucifroN. And Keo, once again, just trying to recover with a defensive keep of his own. You have to wonder, was it worth investing all the keeps on the west side when you needed them on the north? And Lucy, we talked about it. Strip mine on the wood as well. Getting maximum impact, maximum value. Regnit's Cathedral now down. Tok once again working on very limited gold. Luckily this time around, he's got 40 villagers gathering, but is it going to be good enough? TC being targeted now. Molly's going to be thrown into the rooms. I can hear the peasants burning now. Screams coming from every room. Painting a dark picture because this game is looking dark, like it might just be lights out soon for Keo. He really has nowhere left to run. He can't replenish his troops quick enough. His food is suffering, and there's a good reason as well. His farmlands, half of it is not working. It's all been burnt down. It looks like this game just might be a win for Lucy. TC down. Keo refusing to give up. You have to wonder what the hell he's holding on for at this stage. Outmassed at every point in the game. 2 on the cap for LucifroN, and Keo now down at 100. This looks like it's going to be all over, and it looks like LucifroN is going to put 2 on the board and get 1 step closer to making it a clean sweep. And what a way for LucifroN to play this. Really big credit to Keo for actually utilizing the fishing effectively. But then I've got a minus points. I think one of the big things that hurt Keo in this game, I think the opportunity missed, and I know at this level he knows it himself. He's smart enough, right? If I know it, and I'm nowhere near as intelligent or as capable Age of Empires as these lads, he'll know it as well. A big mistake for him was no pressure on the west side, no real pressure. These keep sneaks are cute, but they come so late in that LucifroN actually is past that uncomfortable phase where he's tapped his initial resources at his main base. I think a missed opportunity here was actually Keo wrapping around to the west with a dynamic force of knights and raiding constantly. You actually saw that LucifroN thought that was coming to a certain extent with the spears being spammed out. It never occurred. But luckily for Lucy, because of the unique tech that you get as the HRE, you can actually buff up the defensive capabilities of the spearmen and give them more effective HP, making them a decent frontlining unit, which is exactly what we saw them used as. They were simply meant to be cannon fodder in the composition to protect the layering of Langsneck until they reached the main fight. And they achieved that goal very effectively. At the same time, they're cost effective. Compared to man-at-arms, they're also getting cleaned up by Langsneck quickly. Those Langsneck are the key factor. Anything else is kind of moot. Although you can say the man-at-arms have more health than the spears, the reality is they cost a lot more as well. It's 60 food, 20 wood compared to 100 food, 20 gold. It's a very big difference, and it's something that LucifroN utilized very well. He leveraged that lead to allow him on similar economies to afford additional siege engines at an earlier phase in the game. And also, then min-maxing the micro in conjunction with the keep drop allowed him to snowball into that central island, and the moment that happens, Keo loses. This is exactly why we don't see players instantly invest on a forward base as often on Danube River, because at the moment you lose that forward foothold, you essentially lose the game. You noticed it there, right? Because at that stage of the game, you're breaching the base so quick, there's no opportunity for Keo to actually build a military district at the front of his base and push units out. Instead, he pushes at the back of his base. The problem with this is that then sticks his economy in no man's land, and it means that you're actually not able to protect your landmarks or your economy efficiently anymore. And we saw that start to come into effect slowly but surely, right? The houses being depleted meant that the supply was a problem. He had to replace that. We then saw the farms being denied, so he's not able to gather enough food. Then the Regnitz Cathedral goes down, and that's when you know you're at the end, right? That's when it's coming to an end. That's when it doesn't look good anymore. You can't really see a way back in because you've been forced in this uncomfortable situation, all because of your gambit to set up a base on the central island. I like that move by Keo. My issue in this game is that he didn't pressure on 2 sides, and I think he had the ability to do so. Had he done so, this game is possibly a very, very different late game situation. But instead, LucifroN gets those much needed bulk resources on the west side, pivots back in this game hard, and folks, you can see it in the numbers. He earned this victory. He flatlined Keo so hard. The moment he lost that central base, there was nothing left for Keo. Despite his best efforts to extract resources from his opponent's side of the map, it was too little too late, and it means LucifroN now has 2 points on the board and is just 2 games away from making a very quick start and end to his day.